Hello, everybody. I am Diana Gomez, the Advocacy Manager here at Progress, Texas. And this is our candidate happy hour that we've been having every week. Thank you so much for joining us. And today, joining us is Gina Ortiz Jones, candidate for the 23rd Congressional District, and Celina Montoya, candidate for House District 121. How are y'all doing this afternoon?
Great. Looking forward to early voting starting on Tuesday.
Absolutely.
Yes, definitely. And just to start off on a light note, what's keeping both of y'all grounded nowadays?
Well, I'd say for me, it's pretty easy. I've got a kindergartner and a fourth grader here at home, and we are still distance learning. So, yeah, going through, helping to teach my kids alongside their amazing teachers. That's the day in, day out of, I think, the lives of a lot of people, and that's the priority. So. Nothing like grounding you like a kindergartner coming in for morning snack, afternoon snack, lunch, second breakfast. still just mom to them.
I think for me, I hear from voters all across this district. This is a large district from San Antonio all the way to El Paso, and then 800 miles of the border, U.S.-Mexico border. And so it's a district larger than 30 states. And the experiences during this time have been very different in many parts of the district. In West Texas, kind of what's top of mind is the fallout of the oil economy. Then you compare that with a place like Eagle Pass, where the positivity rate is still over like 15, 17%, right? And so, but I think across the board, the level of suffering, the level of uncertainty, and all the more with what's going to happen with the ACA. People know that quality, affordable healthcare could be the difference between whether or not they have healthcare or if they don't, right? And so that just comes. This time has only highlighted why it's so important that we have quality, affordable healthcare, as people are sharing their stories with me of how they've lost their job and now how they've lost their health insurance, or they have a kid that has a pre-existing condition, and their fear that if their child could very easily be denied coverage or have their premiums jacked up if insurance companies have their way. So I think just hearing from people about their real fears with what could happen if the ACA goes away, and just reiterating though that look, we have a say in this, right? And as Celina just mentioned, we're a couple of days from early voting, and the best response for all of us is to make sure that we've got a plan to vote early during early voting, and that we help as many people also have their voices heard at the ballot box.
Definitely. And like you mentioned, there are so many Texans hurting right now. We've seen Governor Abbott and Texas Republicans mislead a lot of Texans and ignore a lot of common sense measures when it comes to protecting our families. What do both of y'all think needs to be done right now at the state and federal level? And what should Texas be doing to ensure these health and safety measures?
I mean, I would say here at the state level, a number of things that still need to be done. There's still billions of dollars that are being held by the governor right now in funding that was sent down from the federal government that's meant to help people in this time, to help stabilize their housing and their income, and that has yet to be distributed. I think there's also concern still about the process when it comes to testing and tracing. Just yesterday, here at Metro Health in Bexar County, they decided that they were going to start including antibody positive cases to the case count. So we need to have a real understanding of how this data is being managed, how it's being collected, and then how it's going to be utilized as we move towards this recovery. When we look at the state house, we are already looking towards an over $4.6 billion projected budget deficit. This is something where we cannot rely on, the sales tax and then the tax of oil and gas in order to uplift this state, as we've done so many times in the past. There are going to be some really hard conversations happening. And the reality is not too many people are talking about these conversations. They're talking about 5% cuts across the board. Well, when you talk about 5% cuts across the board, even when the governor says he's going to protect education, health, and human services, the reality is so many of the grant dollars that are spread throughout this state directly impact health and human services and education. This is cuts in communities and schools, cuts in Big Brothers Big Sisters, this is cuts in Boys and Girls Club, this is cuts in STEM education. We're not really looking at what a 5% across the board cut truly is going to do, particularly when it comes to health, human services, education, and the needs of families right now.
Yeah, certainly at the federal level, we still, on October 9th, 2020, do not have a national testing strategy. And I'm very thankful that, positivity rates have come down in parts of the district, but we're far from out of the woods, right? You're seeing actually an increase in cases in some places. And as we enter the flu season and it gets colder and people have to spend more time indoors, I think it's incumbent on us and on federal leaders to make sure that they've got the adequate testing in place to make sure that we don't have to shut the economy down. And that's been the key to this. That's been the key that medical experts have said time and time again is key to opening up the economy and really addressing this pandemic, is making sure we have adequate testing. And the fact that we still don't have that in many parts of this district is concerning. Because again, we want the economy to open back up, and we need to have that data. We need to have the data to make good decisions, not assumptions, not hopes, not wishes, right? We need to have the data. And so we need the testing, we need the contact tracing, we need the PPE. And I think this is all really highlighted, frankly, in our state, but across the country, how that information is shared with people, right? How that information is shared with communities so that they can, take the precautions to keep their families safe and understand exactly kind of the nature of the threat that we face and where we are versus where we need to be. And so, I think it's really just highlighted the lack of funding in public infrastructure up to this point that has left so many communities vulnerable. But I think also the type of investments we need to make in public health infrastructure moving forward, whether that be processes, updating systems, helping municipalities and states with their systems to make sure we have the data, we are quickly able to analyze it, we have the experts to do so, and we can quickly share that with the American people. As somebody that worked in national security for almost 15 years, the inability to execute very basic things to me has been mind-boggling. But it goes back to not having the data, and we've got to invest to make sure we are protecting as many people's lives and livelihoods as possible. I think what we should also be thinking about, as some people are returning to work, are the people that are not returning to work, and that is disproportionately women. When you look at those that have returned, the access to quality, affordable childcare, on top of maybe certain entities, certain jobs, certain employers not being as flexible as we would like them to be, to make sure that all working parents can return to their workplace as soon as possible. Sorry, I live on the far west side of San Antonio, and so there are jets every single day from Lackland Air Force Base. I appreciate it because it's the sound of freedom, but I know it can be a little bit loud or unnerving for somebody on that side trying to figure out what's going on. But I think that's really what we should be talking about at the federal level, is as we have an economic recovery, it's not just about the price of, the price of stocks, but certainly, who is coming back to work, who is not coming back to work, and what does that mean for certain communities, especially like San Antonio, that are already so economically segregated and have already high rates of poverty.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of, you mentioned living in the west side of San Antonio. I have family who live in that area as well. And I can't wait for this pandemic to be over and to go back and visit family members and for Fiesta to be back.
Well, it's so funny. We just had a drive-through yard pickup sign, right? And people were handing out their medals. It was so funny. There are some things you're not going to be able to stop us from doing in San Antonio, and that is making medals.
I had such a great time researching both of your campaigns, and I found a great amount of things in common. One of them that Gina, your mom worked as a domestic helper, and Celina, your mom helped your mom clean homes as a child. I grew up with parents in custodial services, and their work ethic had a profound effect on me and my beliefs. And I was just curious as to if your mother's sacrifices and work ethics affected your races at all.
Absolutely. Growing up, my mom worked incredibly hard, and she did so because, there were 7 of us, and so the option for our education was public school all the way. And she wanted to ensure that we could stay in our home and attend a neighborhood school in a district that had a really great reputation for sending kids to college. That was her dream for us, and so, you know, what that meant was, certainly cleaning houses, doing the humble work of taking care of other people's families, until she had the opportunity to take advantage of some of the things that are afforded to women and other minority business owners, and to start her own construction business, which is its own other adventure, right? As being a woman in a very male dominated field. And, what that's really taught me is that there's dignity in every form of work. And in every form of work, there's a family there that's being cared for, and there's a mission, right? A mission to do better for each subsequent generation. And so, thanks to my mom and her hard work and every opportunity we had to help her, we each had our fair shot at a great public education, going off to college, continuing our own education and professional work in the areas that were, most important to each one of us, myself and my siblings. But the one thing that I realized, so dramatically, particularly when I came back to San Antonio after college, I came back and was a reporter for Texas Public Radio here. And so I was reporting all over the city. And I saw just how critical that one decision was, where we went to school, because not every school has the resources in order to make sure that every student has the attention that they need in order to make college an option. And because of those disparities, Gina mentioned the economic segregation of the city, that ties itself into, of course, health disparities and also, educational outcomes. And that's something that was very apparent in my reporting. So much so, in fact, that I left my job as a reporter in order to help start a nonprofit that focuses on literacy intervention in early elementary grades. If it wasn't for my mom and the sacrifices that she made and the support that she gave to myself and all my siblings, I don't know where we would be. But she had the opportunity to be able to make that choice of where we lived and subsequently where we went to school. Most families don't have that choice. Most families don't get the opportunity to pick where their kids go to school and then to work towards staying there. So it's incumbent, particularly upon the state, to make sure that every child is getting a high quality education, that every child has the option of college if that's what they want to do, that every family doesn't feel encumbered by, the hard work and sacrifice that comes along with it. Hard work is great. I think it teaches you a lot of lessons. And I think it's something that's necessary. It's something that I hope I'm showing and passing on to my kids. But, things shouldn't be so hard that they seem impossible. And I think that's where our work comes in. We can make it just a little bit easier for families to feel like they can put food on their tables and take care of themselves when they get sick. We can make it just a little bit easier to ensure that those who want to pursue their education beyond high school or even beyond college to, a graduate degree, we should make it a little bit easier to do so. It only helps all of us if we're better educated, if we're all healthy, if we're all contributing to this community. And, I experienced that, and I was greatly benefited by the work of my community around me. And I just want to see that for every child.
Yeah. My mom was we came to the Philippines, so sorry, is there feedback?
A little bit.
Okay. So she came to the U.S. as a domestic helper, but before that, she actually graduated from the #1 university in the Philippines and was teaching in the Philippines for a couple of years before the opportunity to come to the U.S. Was in the form of come here as a domestic helper. And so to me, there's a couple of things there, right? Not only was she willing to kind of bet on herself and take a chance at the American dream. So one, that just reminds you that our country is this example, right? This idea that people strive for and just want a shot at. And so many people from a very young age, they know that in order to live their best possible life, they're probably going to have to leave their home country. And for many, that means trying to come to our special country. And so, my mom reminded my sister and I, who she raised by herself, that we were very lucky, not smart. We were lucky to be born in this very special country. We'd have to give back to a country that gave us so much. And, so her work ethic has, just been an invaluable, obviously, example for myself and for my sister, because it just shows you, where you are today does not necessarily mean, show you where you'll be tomorrow or after that, right? It's about what you want to put in and how hard you want to work, how hard you want to study. As you're doing all of those things, though, make sure that you are helping people behind you. It's good to be the first. It's more important you're not the last, right? And so I very much, like Celina, feel called to protect the opportunities that allowed me to grow up healthy, get an education, and serve our country. Everybody in this country should have those same opportunities. And those are the values. That's the work ethic that my mom instilled in my sister and I.
That's amazing. Thank y'all for sharing that. And again, I found something else in common about your opponents, which was not too surprising, but still unfortunate, is that both of your opponents are extremely anti-choice, and the spotlight is on abortion access right now with the upcoming Supreme Court nomination, the hearings of Amy Barrett Cohen. What's on the line for Texans when it comes to reproductive rights in this election?
I mean, I think it's all on the line when it comes to Texas and their reproductive freedom. The reality is not a legislative session has gone by when limiting the reproductive access that folks have for care and services hasn't been on the chopping block. Whether that's through, SB 2 and in 22 and trying to limit the ability for communities that have clinics to provide that services through funding, or whether that's simply some of the misinformation and misguidance that happened during the initial closing of a lot of our businesses and even state agencies during this pandemic. I can't tell you how many people were unaware of what services were available to them during that time frame. Really that time frame between March and May, there was a lot of confusion about what people could have access to. And that's not just people who are seeking abortion services. These are people who are looking for, healthcare screenings for cancer, for, general well check and welfare for so many communities, especially when it comes to women, when it comes to their healthcare. Getting your annual exam is one of the few consistencies that a lot of women have when it comes to their healthcare still. And that's something that needs to be preserved. When we are in a state that has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the country, particularly for women of color, we need to be doing more to ensure that there's access to great medical care, not preventing it. And when it comes to the question of whether or not we're going to limit people's options when it comes to starting their family and when and how they're going to do that, this is something that it has been on the chopping block every single legislative session. And so it's important that we have leaders who are willing to stand up and say, no, we are not willing to limit people's healthcare options. We're not going to stand in the way of an individual and their doctor.
I mean, absolutely. We've got to make sure, Celina's comments there in terms of limiting people's or limiting, individuals, like, let's be very clear. I mean, this is about women's access to safe reproductive services, right? This is specifically designed to make sure that women don't have access to quality, affordable healthcare. And that's just so unfortunate, as Celina mentioned, given the disparities and how that affects working families all throughout this district and all throughout our country. And it's just so important that we have leaders up and down the ballot that say, look, any decision that a woman has to make about her body should be between her her family, and her doctor. Not these, politicians in Austin, not these politicians in Washington, D.C. It's just such a fundamental difference, as you mentioned, between us and our opponents, but it makes a world of difference between somebody's economic opportunities, somebody's healthcare opportunities, somebody's basic trajectory in life, right? So this is a place where we need to be very clear about what we stand for and what it means for working people's lives.
Definitely. Gina, Governor Abbott's recent attack on voting rights includes, limiting every county to only one drop-off site for mail-in ballots. Why do you think the GOP is so afraid of the ballot box? And could it have anything to do with races like yours that came within such a close margin back in 2018?
I mean, I think they sense the frustration of the voters with, unfortunately, what has happened in our state, right? From a mishandling of a pandemic to not having good information that people need to keep themselves safe there and to save as many jobs as possible. And then, yes, to your point, this active voter suppression at the end. I mean, and during a pandemic, right, what we should be doing is allowing people to exercise their constitutional right to be heard at the ballot box. And unfortunately, what we've seen time and time again from Austin is a lack of desire to not only do that, but a desire to actively suppress the vote. I mean, Brewster County in this district is larger than the size of Connecticut. Really, it's only going to have one drop box, right? And so, these folks, they know if folks are able to vote in a free and fair election, that they will be held accountable, as they should be, for their failures during this pandemic and this economic crisis. And so, look, I think what we've got to do is work twice as hard to make sure that we reach out to everyone in our community, all our family members, all our friends, make sure they have a plan to vote early during early voting, make sure you send in your mail-in ballot if you're able to do so, as early as possible. We just have to run up the score and make sure that we send them a resounding message that we want something different. We deserve something different, both in Austin and in DC.
Definitely turning the attempted voter suppression into just a more intense voter motivator. Celina, for folks who might not know, you would be the very first Democrat, the first Latina, and the youngest person to ever represent the district that you're running for. What does it mean to you to represent the diversity of Texas voices?
Part of what it means to me is that it's taken us so long. But I think it's reflective of Texas as a whole. There have been, thousands of men who've represented in the state house, and women have just been a fraction of that. Even still, in this particular district, we certainly see that there's a demographic shift happening. And so I think it's important, fundamentally, that, our representation aligns, at least in some degree, with what the people in this district look like and what their history is like. But even more than that, I think when we look at Texas as a whole, this whole state is changing. And I think it's important that leadership changes with it. Being the first, Gina said this too, being the first is great, but it's important not to be the last. I would actually much rather not be the first to anything. I would much rather be able to continue on a tradition of electing leaders who represent our district, not just in terms of party and not just in terms of gender and age, but also in terms of our values. And, this is an opportunity to do just that.
Yeah, definitely. So we are only days away from early voting. For folks that are listening and that are feeling inspired, how can they get involved in your campaigns?
Sure. Well, look, I know something about close races, and I know something about how important it is that we do everything we can. We make sure we leave it all on the field. And, I know it sounds cliche, but literally, y'all, I think everyone knows this is the most important election of our lifetime. And it's important that we elect Vice President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. But let's be very clear, right? What we are living through, it didn't have to be this bad, and it wouldn't have been this bad if we didn't have all the leaders underneath them that have been complicit right, complicit in making this situation what it is. And so it's important that we elect Democrats up and down the ballot. So my website is GinaOrtizJones.com. When I ran in 2018, it was just 926 votes. And as positivity rates are still very high in some parts of the district. And look, I think both Celina and I have a commitment to leading by example, and we're going to do our part to make sure that we're not putting people's lives needlessly at risk. And so the conversations that we would normally be having at the door, we are now having on the phone or via text. And so if you have some time to help us make these phone calls and help us have these quality conversations, help people get their plan to vote, please check out our website and please sign up for a shift. It can't be November 4th, right? And you're unsatisfied with what has come about. And then you're looking at the results and you're like, oh man, I wish I coulda, woulda, shoulda. We cannot do that. We cannot afford another 4 years of this nonsense. And the good thing is we can change that, right? We can change that, but we've got to make sure that our voices are heard at the ballot box.
Yeah, I mean, to echo that, any opportunity that you have to give of your time, your talent, your treasure is going to go so far, particularly these days before early voting. One of the things that we've seen is that we're expecting an increase in the number of people who choose to vote early, whether that's by mail or at one of our polling locations. And voter contact is really incredibly important. As Gina mentioned, we are trying to ensure that we are not contributing to the spread of this virus, and so we are not knocking on doors like we normally would have. This time last year, we were knocking on doors and having conversations with people and bringing people together, and that's just simply not an option right now. In order to make sure that people are safe, so make calls, sign up to volunteer. But if you get a call, answer it, right? And the reality is too, if you get to the polls and you vote early on October 13th, we'll get that information that says you voted. We won't know who you voted for. We won't know how you voted, but we'll know that you voted, you're good to go, and you'll come off of the phone list of people to call to remind to vote. So the earlier you vote, the better, and the more opportunity there is for us to contact those people who need a little bit more encouragement, who maybe need a little bit more information on what to do and how to go about making their voting plan. Don't just make a plan for yourself though. Bring a family member, talk to a neighbor, talk to a friend. Make sure that when you're voting, you're taking 3 other people with you, whether that's physically in your car because you're in the same household, or texting them a reminder that today's the day to vote and you guys are gonna get to see each other in a socially distant way to cast your ballot. And again, I think one of the things that's significant in this particular election, it's not just voting for Vice President Biden and Senator Harris, the top of the ticket, and coming on down. Don't forget that we also have folks on the Supreme Court who are up for election as well. And as good as our laws are, they're only as good as those people who are able to to interpret them and see them through in the courts. So make sure that you are looking at every single race and know that one of the things that's different this year is that we cannot select single party ballots anymore. So you can't just go in, say Democrat, and be done with it. Take your time, make sure you consider every single race, and make sure that you are you're taking full advantage of your right to vote.
I will plug one more thing. So after you have made as many calls as you can for me and Celina, if you have additional time, the elections offices are short in terms of poll workers. So if you are able to do that, that is also so critical in making sure that people don't have their polling site closed, don't have long lines. So if you are able to do that, please consider doing so. And that's another way to make sure that you are, helping to protect our democracy. Please consider that.
Thank y'all both. Final question to round out this happy hour here at Progress Texas. I wanted to ask if there's something that both of y'all are looking forward to besides Fiesta after the pandemic, and if there are any other final words for our viewers.
Oh gosh, something that my family's done for a really long time, is we've always come together for Sunday dinners, to celebrate birthdays, to celebrate anniversaries and obviously I have a large family. My mom raised 7 of us on her own, and most of us are still here in San Antonio. And so that's a large group. And so we haven't been able to come together like we would have liked. So I think like a lot of folks, I look forward to being able to be with my family a bit more and more consistently. But even more than that, I look forward to being able to represent this district in a way that looks at everyone's family and puts them first, looks at what it is to, have to decide between, protecting your family's health or having to go to work. That looks at, making sure that people who are learning from home have the resources they need, and that teachers have the training and the access that they need in order to fulfill, their calling of being a teacher, to make sure that those who are providing the healthcare that is so necessary right now have the resources that they need and the protections that are necessary. There are so many opportunities to do good as we go towards recovery, but we have to get there first. And we need leadership that acknowledges that it's not just about recovery from a pandemic, one that we don't know the trajectory of just yet. It's also recovery in the terms of our economy and helping ensure that people have the ability to engage in that recovery for healthcare reform and educational reform, and meeting people with strategies that are going to take a blended approach and that are going to be cognizant of where everyone is and what they're able to do. So, it's really looking forward to not only being with my family, but representing every family.
Yeah, I mean, mine is very similar. My family is not as large, but I'm sure we're just as tight. And my mom raised my younger sister and I by herself. And my sister's in the Navy. And you can imagine the restrictions that they've placed on their ability to travel, just because, this could have national security implications, as it actually already has. And so we're only 14 months apart. We're very close. And she makes me laugh the hardest because she is really the best at needling me, really. That's what baby sisters do. But I look forward to being able to give her a hug, right, and being for us all three to be able to just be together and enjoy each other's company again. And similarly, winning the election is just the first step. There's so much work that we know we need to do to make sure we get our country back on the right track and make sure that communities that have been especially hit hard during this pandemic and economic crisis, that we're doing right by every community, and that we are making sure our recovery is as inclusive as it needs to be, and we're making the investments so that so many communities aren't so vulnerable in the future. I think that is, I echo Celina's comments there, and frankly, it'd be an honor to work with Celina as a federal legislature, as she's in the state house, because I think when we think about Texas, right, we're both committed to making sure that the 1 in 10 kids in this country that calls Texas home has the brightest future possible. And that requires good leadership.
Definitely good leadership that both of y'all possess. I'm looking forward to seeing such smart women who in Congress, Gina, and in the State House, Celina. I want to thank both of y'all for joining Progress Texas and for giving our viewers some more information on your campaigns, how to get involved, and some great words of encouragement. Thank y'all so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Deanna.